He was answering a question that I'd always wondered. When am I going to die?
The fearless Hamster, the man who laughed in the face of death, walked away from a 280 miles per hour crash and came back smiling for the cameras. For years, he looked untouchable, the perfect mix of fame, fortune, and family. But behind that trademark grin was a secret he's been carrying for years, one he could no longer bury beneath the jokes, the cars, or the showmanship. Because while the world saw the adrenaline junkie who cheated death twice, very few saw what it cost him when the cameras stopped rolling. He wasn't just rebuilding cars, he was rebuilding himself. And now, what he's been quietly hiding is finally out in the open, and it changes everything we thought we knew about him. Don't skip this video because by the end, you'll see Richard Hammond in a way you've never seen before. Before he became the face of Top Gear, Richard Hammond was just another voice on the radio, hustling across England with a dream and a second-hand car that barely started in winter. In the early 90s, he wasn't a TV celebrity. He was the guy carrying cables, voicing traffic updates, and hoping anyone would remember his name after a broadcast. Between odd radio shifts and side jobs, Hammond did something that would quietly change his entire life. While working at a small PR agency in London, surrounded by ringing phones and half-broken coffee machines, he met Amanda "Mindy" Etheridge, the woman who would eventually become his wife. She was confident, sharp, and 4 years older, already grounded in a career of her own. He was the nervous newcomer trying to make people laugh through the stress. Their connection was instant. It wasn't the fame or the fast cars that caught her attention, it was his ridiculous optimism. He had joked about becoming the next big thing while still struggling to pay rent. Mindy, on the other hand, saw something few others did: not just ambition, but sincerity. They started dating quietly, long before the world cared about who Richard Hammond was. He was learning to survive in a cutthroat media world. She was learning how to balance her career and this unpredictable dreamer she loved. For nearly 7 years, they built something real, not built on fame or money, but on the kind of faith only two unknowns can share. No one watching those early radio shows could have guessed that the man behind that cheerful voice would one day crash a jet car, cheat death twice, and still find himself questioning what it all meant. But that journey, the one that would make him a global name, was about to begin. And the moment he walked through the doors of the BBC in 2002, everything changed. When Top Gear returned to the BBC in 2002, nobody expected it to become one of the most watched shows on Earth, and certainly not Richard Hammond. He wasn't the first pick. He wasn't even the loudest voice in the room. He was the new guy sitting next to Jeremy Clarkson and James May, trying to prove he belonged. But the moment the cameras rolled, something clicked. His quick wit, underdog energy, and genuine love for cars made him instantly relatable. Viewers didn't see a TV host, they saw one of their own. Within months, Top Gear transformed from a simple motoring show into a global phenomenon. Hammond's nickname, the Hamster, captured exactly what fans adored about him. Small frame, big heart, unstoppable energy. Every episode pushed boundaries, racing trains, launching caravans, driving through deserts, and Hammond attacked each challenge with fearless enthusiasm. But behind the laughter and roaring engines, fame was creeping in fast. He was suddenly recognized everywhere: supermarkets, petrol stations, family holidays. The man who once begged for airtime was now one of Britain's most familiar faces. It was thrilling, but exhausting. Mindy stayed grounded through it all. While Hammond's life became one long shoot schedule, she was home in the countryside raising their daughters, Isabella and Willow. He had returned from filming stunts in Vietnam or Africa, hug his kids, sleep for a day, then fly out again. To viewers, he looked like he was living the dream. To Mindy, it often felt like she was living in the waiting room of that dream. It was supposed to be another adrenaline-fueled day at the track, just one more challenge for the man who seemed invincible. On the 20th of September 2006, Richard Hammond was filming a Top Gear stunt at Elvington Airfield, driving a jet-propelled dragster known as the Vampire. The goal was simple: break a speed record. What happened next would nearly end his life. At 288 miles per hour, a tire failed. In seconds, the car flipped, tumbled across the runway, and dug into the earth with forces so extreme that no one expected him to survive. By the time rescue crews reached him, the wreckage looked like nothing human could have crawled out of. Back home, Mindy got the call no partner ever wants. Her husband was in a coma with a severe brain injury. Their daughters, Isabella, just 6, and Willow, only 2, were too young to understand. Mindy told them a gentle half-truth that Daddy had crashed another car and messed up his clothes, so she was bringing him clean ones. She shielded them from a nightmare no child should live through. For 2 weeks, Richard lay unconscious, hovering between life and death. Mindy barely left the hospital. Every beep of a monitor, every flicker of movement, she was there, waiting, hoping. When he finally opened his eyes, the relief was indescribable. But the reality hit harder. Hammond woke up confused and disoriented. He looked at Mindy, the woman who had spent years at his side, and said something that shattered her heart. "You're lovely, but you're not my wife." His brain was scrambled. Memories blurred, emotions misplaced. At one point, he even insisted his wife was French. It wasn't anger, it was the damage talking. But for Mindy, it was a moment of unimaginable pain. The road to recovery was brutal. Hammond had to relearn balance, speech, and focus. He battled mood swings, memory lapses, and deep depression he refused to show the public. Mindy became his full-time caregiver, managing medication, protecting his privacy, and guarding his dignity when the tabloids tried to turn his pain into a headline. Yet through all of it, she stood firm. She became the reason he got up, the reason he smiled, the reason he found his way back. By early 2007, against every odd, Hammond returned to Top Gear smiling, cracking jokes, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. He survived the crash, but he was no longer the same man. And that difference, invisible to cameras but obvious at home, would shape every decision that followed. By 2005, Top Gear was drawing hundreds of millions of viewers across more than 100 countries. The trio's chemistry was lightning in a bottle, the banter, the chaos, the danger. Hammond was riding the highest wave of his career. Yet, as any racer knows, the faster you go, the more violent the crash can be when things go wrong. And for Richard Hammond, that moment was coming faster than anyone could imagine. Richard Hammond's comeback was the kind of story that TV loves: the miracle survivor, smiling through pain, back behind the wheel as if nothing happened. The nation cheered. The Top Gear studio audience gave him a standing ovation. Jeremy Clarkson cracked jokes, and Hammond laughed along. But behind the laughter was a man quietly battling something no one could see. His body healed faster than his mind. The brain injury left scars that didn't show on camera, sudden mood swings, crushing fatigue, flashes of confusion. Hammond later admitted he couldn't even remember filming parts of early episodes after his recovery. "I'd forget what I was saying mid-sentence," he recalled. But to protect the show and his pride, he buried it. He refused to be seen as fragile. At home, the reality was different. Mindy was no longer just a wife, she was a caretaker. She kept track of medications, doctor visits, and his volatile moods. One moment he'd be upbeat and energetic, the next, distant and withdrawn. She absorbed it all in silence, shielding him and their daughters from the chaos that fame didn't prepare them for. And the pressure kept building. Top Gear's success meant even longer filming days, more dangerous stunts, and travel that pulled him away for weeks at a time. Hammond's passion for risk hadn't faded. If anything, surviving the crash made him more determined to prove he could still do it. He didn't slow down, he sped up. But Mindy could see what no one else did. Every close call reopened old wounds. Every episode where he pushed himself to the edge chipped away at their peace. She wanted him safe, he wanted to feel alive. It was love caught between fear and freedom. Publicly, they looked unshakable. Privately, they were surviving, but just barely. And as Hammond threw himself deeper into his work, chasing the next thrill and hiding the pain, he didn't realize he was drifting away from the very person who'd saved him. The world saw triumph, Mindy saw exhaustion. And that silent divide would soon lead to the next turning point, another crash that almost broke them completely. By 2017, Richard Hammond had survived what most people wouldn't even dare attempt once. He'd become the symbol of resilience, the man who beat death and came back grinning. But fate wasn't done testing him yet. While filming the Grand Tour in Switzerland, Hammond was behind the wheel of a Rimac Concept 1, a $1 million electric supercar capable of hitting 200 miles per hour. The plan was simple: film a breathtaking hill climb. What happened instead could have easily become a tragedy replayed on global news. As Hammond approached a curve, the car lost control. It shot off the road, rolled down a hill, and exploded into flames. Within seconds, the supercar was burning to ash. Somehow, Richard crawled out just before the fire consumed everything. He had a fractured knee, a metal plate inserted in his leg, but he was alive. Again, when Mindy got that call, it wasn't shock, it was heartbreak layered on exhaustion. She'd already lived this nightmare once. Seeing him hospitalized again, patched up, joking to cameras as if it were nothing, she did what she always did: stayed calm in public and terrified in private. In an interview shortly after the crash, sitting beside a bandaged Hammond, she tried to keep her composure but couldn't hide the truth behind her half-smile. "I did say 3 strikes and you're out," she laughed. "You've had 2 goes, don't do it again." It sounded like humor, But to those who knew them, it was a warning wrapped in love. 2 crashes, 2 miracles, and a marriage stretched to its limit. For Hammond, the crash was another reminder of how fragile everything was. He'd stared death in the face twice and walked away, but something inside him had shifted. The adrenaline rush wasn't as satisfying. The recovery was longer, the emotional toll heavier. He couldn't pretend anymore that he was unbreakable. For Mindy, that second crash wasn't just another scare, it was proof that the risk would never truly end. The same drive that made him extraordinary was also what kept tearing their peace apart. When he finally returned home to their countryside estate, he promised to slow down, to be present, to protect what really mattered. And for a while, it looked like he might. But as time would prove, some people are wired to chase motion even when the stillness is what they need most. After surviving 2 near-fatal crashes, Richard Hammond seemed determined to build a quieter life. In 2008, he and Mindy moved into their dream home, a 300-year-old countryside estate called Ballatry Castle in Herefordshire. It wasn't really a castle, but it had everything they'd ever wanted. Sprawling gardens, 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool, stables, and endless open space for their daughters, Isabella and Willow, to grow up away from flashing cameras. To the outside world, it looked perfect. Hammond had fame, fortune, and a family living in what seemed like a real-life fairy tale. Magazines showed him walking the grounds with his dogs or tinkering in his workshop, the image of a man who had finally found peace. But those glossy photos never showed what was happening behind the gates. While the castle symbolized security, it also became a kind of prison. Richard's schedule was relentless, filming, events, appearances, and travel that kept him away for weeks. When he was home, he was restless. The stillness of the countryside didn't calm him. It made him uneasy. He'd wake early to work on projects, check emails, plan trips, always in motion, even when life begged him to slow down. Mindy, meanwhile, kept the household grounded. She managed the family's routines, handled the estate, and tried to give their daughters as normal a life as possible. But the emotional distance was growing. Richard's focus was scattered between his career, his next build, and his lingering fear that if he stopped pushing himself, everything might fall apart. Friends who visited Ballatry described it as beautiful but oddly quiet, like a place built for laughter that had grown too still. The couple still loved each other, but love wasn't fixing what ambition had broken. By the late 2010s, the cracks that had once been hidden beneath charm and humor were becoming harder to ignore. The near-death experiences hadn't slowed him down. They'd only deepened his need to keep proving something, maybe to the world, maybe to himself. And while Hammond chased meaning behind the wheel and on screen, Mindy longed for stability, something fame could never give. The castle had once been their dream. Now it was just a reminder that even the most beautiful places can start to feel empty when 2 people are quietly growing apart. By 2020, Richard Hammond was ready for something new, something that felt his. After nearly 2 decades in television, he wanted to build something tangible, something that didn't rely on cameras or scripts. That dream became The Smallest Cog, a classic car restoration business near his home in Herefordshire. It was meant to be a passion project, a way to reconnect with his roots, to turn wrenches instead of chasing TV schedules. Hammond invested nearly £500,000 of his own money, even selling some of his prized vehicles, including his beloved Porsche 911, to fund the startup. He called it a return to what I love most. At first, Mindy supported him completely. She'd always admired his work ethic and wanted him to find peace in something safer than high-speed stunts. But as months passed, that peace turned into pressure. The Smallest Cog was a dream, but also a financial strain. The business took longer than expected to find stability, and Hammond was suddenly juggling more than ever, managing the workshop by day, filming the grand tour by night, and fighting off exhaustion in between. Ironically, the man who had spent years being away from home was now always there, but mentally somewhere else. Mindy would see him buried in spreadsheets, pacing through the kitchen with phone calls about budgets, or filming promo clips from their driveway. He was home, but not really present. Those small things, the missed dinners, the late nights, the constant stress started adding up. What used to be laughter-filled evenings at Ballatry slowly became quiet routines. Conversations turned to logistics instead of love. Friends noticed it too. They still functioned as a family, still smiled in public, but privately the distance had settled in like fog, thick and impossible to ignore. There was no explosive fight, no scandal, no betrayal. Just 2 people who had been running on fumes for years. Mindy, who had held the family together through 2 near-death experiences, began to realize she was now the one running out of energy. And Richard, the man who'd faced flames, wreckage, and pain with unshakable courage, couldn't see that the real crash had already happened right at home. By the winter of 2024, the Hammond marriage quietly reached its limit. Decades of love, loyalty, and shared survival had turned into quiet acceptance. They weren't enemies. They were simply two people heading in different directions, one chasing momentum, the other searching for peace. And soon, the world would find out that the couple everyone thought was unbreakable had finally reached the end of the road. The news no one saw coming broke quietly. On January 9, 2025, Richard and Mindy Hammond released a short, carefully worded statement not through tabloids or interviews, but on their own terms. There was no blame, no bitterness, just an ending written with grace. This Christmas, we were together as a family, and this year, we will still be a family but just structured a bit differently, they said. Our marriage is coming to an end, but we've had an amazing 28 years together and 2 incredible daughters. We're immensely proud of the family we've built. There would be no further comment, no public accusations, no social media drama, just a request for privacy, the kind of quiet dignity that had always defined them. Fans around the world were stunned. For years, Richard and Mindy had seemed like one of the few unshakable couples in British television, 2 people who'd weathered near death, global fame, and unrelenting schedules. The idea that they were separating felt unthinkable, but behind the smiles, the cracks had been there for years, invisible to anyone who wasn't living inside the story. Those closest to them said the split was heartbreakingly calm. There was sadness, not anger, acceptance, not blame. Richard, now 55, was said to be devastated, but determined to handle it with maturity. Friends revealed he'd tried everything to save the marriage, but sometimes effort isn't enough when 2 lives have evolved in different directions. One of the hardest parts was the estate Ballatry Castle, the home that had carried their history, their children's laughter, and countless memories. It became a key point in the separation. Mindy, the one who had turned that property into a family sanctuary, was determined to keep it. And Richard didn't fight her. He let it go, even though it meant leaving behind the walls that had once symbolized their dream life. He didn't move far. Just down the lane into a modest renovated barn on the same property, a symbolic shift from grandeur to simplicity. A man who once lived in a castle was now rebuilding his life within sight of it. Alone, but not defeated. For the first time in decades, Richard Hammond wasn't surrounded by film crews, engines, or applause. He was surrounded by silence, the kind that forces reflection. After 28 years with the woman who'd seen him at his best and his worst, he was starting over. But even in heartbreak, the Hammonds chose kindness. Their daughters, Isabella and Willow, were at the center of everything. Birthdays, holidays, and family events would still be shared. The message was clear. The marriage had ended, but the family hadn't. It wasn't the explosive celebrity breakup the press expected. It was something far rarer, 2 people choosing peace over noise, respect over resentment, and for Richard Hammond, the man who'd survived 2 high-speed crashes, this quiet ending may have been the hardest impact of all. Through everything, the fame, the crashes, the career highs, and the quiet heartbreak, one thing never changed for Richard and Mindy Hammond: their devotion to their daughters. Isabella and Willow Hammond, now in their early 20s, had grown up largely shielded from the chaos of television life. While their father was one of Britain's most recognizable faces, Mindy worked tirelessly to protect their privacy. There were no red carpet appearances, no tabloid features, just a normal upbringing in the countryside, surrounded by animals, homework, and the kind of grounding that fame can't buy. When the divorce announcement went public, it wasn't the headlines that mattered, it was the family conversations behind closed doors. Insiders say both Richard and Mindy handled it exactly as their daughters had been raised, with maturity, honesty, and care. There were tears, of course, but there was also understanding. They hadn't lost parents, they'd simply gained 2 separate homes filled with the same love. Friends close to the family described the girls as remarkably supportive. They knew what their parents had been through, not just the pressures of fame, but the near-death scares, the constant uncertainty, the toll it took on everyone involved. When Richard crashed in 2017, it was Isabella who called him an idiot in relief that he was still alive, a moment that perfectly summed up their bond. Tough love laced with deep affection. After the separation, the Hammonds made one thing clear: birthdays, holidays, and milestones would still be celebrated together. There would be no choosing sides, no awkward silences. The family unit would stay intact, just reshaped. Even as the media speculated about what went wrong, both Richard and Mindy refused to fuel the noise. They didn't sell interviews or trade jabs. Instead, they focused on being present for their daughters, showing that endings don't have to destroy families. Sometimes they just redefine them. Today, Isabella and Willow keep a low profile, steering clear of fame and social media glare. They've inherited their father's creativity and their mother's quiet strength. And though they watch their parents' marriage come to an end, they also watch something rare: two adults choosing dignity over drama. For Richard Hammond, that means everything. He said it before: the cars, the fame, the success, none of it means a thing without family. And even if his marriage didn't survive, the love at the center of it did. Because long after the engines fade and the lights go out, family is the one thing that keeps him driving forward. For the first time in decades, Richard Hammond's life isn't defined by speed. There are no roaring engines outside his window, no packed filming schedules, no need to pretend everything's fine. The man once known for cheating death twice is now learning to live at a different pace, one built not on adrenaline, but on acceptance. Those closest to him say the past year has been one of deep reflection. Hammond still films with Clarkson and May for the Grand Tour, but something about him has changed. He's quieter, more grounded, more thoughtful. He still jokes, still smiles, but behind that trademark grin is a man who's been forced to rethink what truly matters. In interviews, he's hinted at this transformation, joking about living like a farmer in a barn after moving out of Ballatry Castle, yet admitting the solitude has made him introspective. He spends more time in his workshop, tinkering on old engines, sometimes alone for hours, surrounded by the familiar smell of oil and steel. The smallest cog, once a source of stress, has become therapy, a reminder that rebuilding something broken takes time, patience, and heart. And that metaphor isn't lost on him. Because this time, the thing he's rebuilding isn't a car, it's himself. His close friends, including Clarkson and May, have quietly stood by him through it all. They've seen the toll, the fatigue, and the effort it takes to carry on with a smile. In their own way, they've become a kind of second family men who've shared danger, laughter, and loss together for 2 decades. Hammond's humor remains his armor. On a podcast earlier this year, he laughed about adjusting to life alone, saying, "I'm in a barn with a kettle and a dog, and I might start restoring that next." Beneath the joke was something honest, a man finally making peace with simplicity. For a person who's spent his whole career chasing motion, stillness can feel terrifying. But maybe, for Richard Hammond, that's exactly what he needed. The crashes, the fame, the heartbreak, they all led him here, to a life stripped down to the essentials: work, family, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing he's still standing. He once said, "I've stared death in the face twice, and it tends to put things in perspective." Now, he's staring at something different, a new beginning built not on survival, but on growth. Because in the end, the man who spent decades repairing machines has learned the hardest truth of all. Some repairs take more than a wrench. They take courage, humility, and time. And maybe, just maybe, this time Richard Hammond isn't racing to the finish line. He's finally learning how to drive slow and enjoy the road ahead. His story isn't one of failure, it's one of evolution. He's faced flames, fame, and heartbreak, and somehow, he's still finding ways to smile through the smoke. Because even when the cameras stop rolling and the world moves on, the journey doesn't end, it just shifts gears. So maybe that's the real legacy of Richard Hammond, not the crashes, not the cars, but the courage to start over when life breaks down. What do you think? Did fame and danger slowly pull him away from the peace he always needed, or was this the only road he was ever meant to drive? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you've made it this far, you're the kind of person who sees beyond the headlines, so hit that like button for truth and subscribe. Because sometimes, the quietest endings reveal the loudest truths.